morning, Leigh.
Good morning.
How are you this fine day?
I'm good. I've just woken up, as I was saying to you before we started recording, a touch hungover from being taken out by the girlfriend for a little birthday treat to see Hadestown. So I'm feeling musical theatre this morning.
A little bit of musical theatre on a weeknight, I think, is just classy as fuck, you know?
We love it on a Tuesday. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We love to see it. And also, I will say, the nostalgia and a moment for the pick piece of furniture up, specifically chair, turn, transition moment mid-song, and we're in a new space.
Yeah. Dynamic furniture movement. That like really came into vogue when we were studying in a big way.
We love a transition. Shall we into this very intriguing episode, Fiona?
I think we should. I mean, I'm just going to say full disclosure. I'm a grown-up and therefore I can make my own choices. And the choice that I made this morning, Leigh, was to eat basically half of an apple crumble for breakfast. So I think I'm going to have quite a big sugar rush at some point.
Amazing. I've had a full cafetiere of coffee. So
wow.
I'm excited.
As someone who doesn't drink coffee, that is crazy to me.
Yeah, it's because I brought this cinnamon coffee back from Trader Joe's the last time I was in the States. And my caffeine addiction is truly
it's skyrocketed.
out of hand.
Yeah. Okay, so we're both... Let's just say we're ready and raring to go, shall we?
In the very chaotic energy that we've both come in with this morning, this episode of Queer Girls Watch The West Wing is covering the episode Someone's Going to Emergency, Somebody's Going to Jail.
When I read this episode title, I was like, whoa, what the hell is going on here? I also immediately read it in Toby Ziegler's voice. However, it is, of course, a lyric from a Don Henley of the Eagles song.
Oh my
New York Minute. Leigh, are you well versed in New York Minute?
I was not prepared for this opening, I have to say.
It's a rogue choice, but for me, it really reads Aaron Sorkin.
Just like a power ballad moment.
I would really recommend listeners, if you've never heard New York Minute, just pop it on. For me, this is very nostalgic because my mum used to listen to the Eagles a lot when we were kids. So you would go in the kitchen and her CD player and CD rack would be there. And she'd be like, you can choose a CD, but it must be like Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles, the Corrs, Dire Straits, Shania Twain.
Excellent music taste from Nicola there, actually, I must say.
I know. So... the previously on, Leigh, we're harking back to the Jed Abbey showdown of last episode and also a little rollback to Block of Cheese Day.
Of season 1 fame.
At this point, I paused my DVD to listen to New York Minute and have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because
in
America.
honor of America.
Yeah.
I love that for you.
Yeah.
I love that for you.
Thank you.
I was like, is this a reference to... is this like an ode, like a subtle ode to 9/11? But this came out in February of 2001. So 9/11 had not yet happened. We've just giving a moment to New York.
Yeah. And just to the work of Don and the Eagles, really.
Yeah. American patriots, one and all.
So the episode opens, and I mean this with no offense, but the opening of this episode is edited like a music video.
It is, or like the heartbreak montage of a 90s rom-com.
Truly. So it's like dawn in DC, and it's a lot of like establishing shots of like Washington DC, but like it's the specific fades.
It's like sultry. Everything is like pink and sexy.
And like New York Minute is just playing over all of this. And then like we go like there's like an establishing shot of the White House, and then like we go into the White House and it's like everything's like quiet, like not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And
until we see Sam Seaborn sleeping like a little cherub.
Just on a little sofa, just like with his hands underneath his head, just like snoozing. It's very funny that Sam has chosen to fall asleep in Toby's office. And I feel very confident that Toby doesn't know about this. And we're kind of sort of shaken from this strange musical slumber by Leo, like waking Sam up. Sam's immediate response to being woken up, at work at like 5 o'clock in the morning is just to go, what day is this? Doesn't feel healthy.
No, we're not in a well place with Sam this week.
And then Sam's like, why are you here so early? And Leo's like, oh, the protesters. And I'm like, oh, doesn't feel good.
No, Leo then goes on to like an elaborate explanation of all of the roads that are closed. And I had quite a visceral flashback to attempting to arrive at the Edinburgh Fringe last summer with friend of the pod, Christopher Hall, driving a rental car and me on navigation.
Why? Why were you... with respect, with love and respect, Lee, your sense of direction is trash.
Now I can follow a Google Maps. I can follow that. Do you know what I mean? But when there are unmarked road closures and it seems that every road into Edinburgh is closed, the energy in the car, I will say, Carrie Underwood was turned off and the energy did become fractious.
I was obsessed with Leo McGarry's pure airport dad energy, which was that he was like, these are all the roads that are closed. I will list those roads to you. I will then tell you the way that I did go. And I did leave for work at 5 a.m. because I would like to beat the traffic.
Yeah, it's real. It's really real, for sure.
And then I was just like, wow, imagining like teenage Mallory. They're like on a summer holiday trip to Florida, being like dragged to the airport like 6 hours early. Mm-hmm. Leo in sandals,
It's giving Uncle Bryn and Gavin and Stacey.
Yes. The car will leave. I will be pulling away at this time.
For any American listeners, if you need something just like heartwarming, like a little cuddle for the soul, I'd really recommend just treating yourself to exploring Gavin and Stacey as a sitcom, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, and not I think there was an American version. No. Do the UK version.
Yeah, BBC. Please.
Many parts of it will be confusing to you, but just stick with it. Mm-hmm. It's glorious. Okay, why is Sam not at home?
Is you okay, hun? What's happening here?
It feels like we're in a very busy period. Mm-hmm. Sam is kind of working on the presidential pardons. Mm-hmm. And is it that there's only certain times of the year that the president can pardon people?
So the president can grant an unlimited number of pardons. Mm-hmm. But the only exception is anything related to impeachment.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And obviously they can only pardon, as we learned in our What Even Is a Federal Crime episode, they can only pardon for federal crimes, not for state crimes. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Okay. And I imagine it's something like, just so that it's not always bubbling along, I guess it's something that the executive branch look at, like, at certain time periods during the year to like collate information. Because it seems like Sam's like, I'm working on it. And then later in the episode, he sort of references coming back to something in a few months' time, like when the next round of pardons is being worked on. But either way, I think what's coming across is that Sam's like, my workload is too much, which is why I'm sleeping at work. But actually, he's a terrible liar. And it may just be because of personal issues. Leo's like, take the day off. Mm-hmm.
It's a Friday. Nothing's happening. Go home.
And Sam says, I'm just going to go and change my shirt.
Leo then says, you're putting too much faith in the magical powers of a new shirt. And I think that's something we can all take as a moment of reflection. And if not a manifesto for how one should not live one's life.
Yeah, Leo McGarry's just hit the nail on the head there. What we learn from this is that the reason Sam's been sleeping at work are because his parents are splitting up. Oh. And it's not like a kind of Jenny-Leo divorce. It is, in Sam's words, my father didn't pick up a cocktail waitress, Leo. He's had a woman in an apartment in Santa Monica for 28 years.
This is dark. This is really dark. My thoughts are with Mrs. Seaborn at this difficult time.
Yes,
because
agreed.
That is, my entire life has been a lie.
I think that's where the spiral is happening.
Yeah.
In my head, like Sam Seaborn, very upper middle class, like perfect family, model parents, model children, family holidays, family photo Christmas cards with like the updates. The boys have been doing so well this year. And then just to be like, for the majority of my life, that's been a lie. I can see Sam kind of losing it.
Yeah.
For want of a better phrase.
Yeah.
Moment of conjecture, just very briefly, just to drop in something into the narrative, which is, we've mentioned twice now in these opening few minutes of the episode that there are cordons around the National Geographic Society. Just going to leave that there with you.
Yeah.
And our other bit of conjecture is, of course, the arrival of Ginger into work.
At 6:35 a.m., like the professional that she is opening the communications department at not yet even 7 a.m., Fiona.
Yeah, and with also sensational hair.
That means that she's getting up at what, 4? In order to have like polished hair.
Because if she's commuting in some way, whether she's driving or walking or getting the bus, that's an hour.
For sure.
At least. Especially with all the cordons.
And not to mention like going through security on a daily basis.
Yeah, queen of our hearts, Ginger. Leigh, it's officially Block of Cheese Day.
It's Block of Cheese Day, part 2, Be Still My Beating Heart.
I would love to, we touched on it briefly, but raise the concept of men talking about traffic. There's a whole scene between Josh and Leo where they're talking about traffic. Like Josh Lyman knows nothing about cars. No. I don't think Josh Lyman can drive. You know.
I love that story for you.
But he's just like chatting with Leo like a bro. Because Leo was like, oh, how'd you get in? And Josh was like, I walked.
I am fascinated by the gap in a confident, red-blooded, straight American male psyche between how they perceive themselves and how they factually are. You know? It's like Josh is this very urban, political, cosmopolitan guy. But it's like in his mind, he's like out the back of a garage just like working on his car, you know?
Yes. That's the image that he wants us to be like, rolled up shirt sleeves, like a bit of grease on the forearms. But the reality is if someone popped the hood of a car, he'd be like,
I'm lost. Yeah.
But let me tell you something about the Constitution. I'd like you to note that Toby has been tasked with talking to protesters. And we are heading into the Roosevelt room to like assign everyone their Block of Cheese Day groups. Leo's walking and talking with Josh, and his entrance is this little thing called team morale, Josh. You got to make people feel good about themselves. All right, everybody, shut the hell up. I've fired more people than you before breakfast.
Leo is camp.
Truly, yes. And I think often he's overshadowed by Jed's campness.
Yes.
But when Jed is not present, Leo can really flourish. You know?
I have to say also, obviously, I'm sure the budget went up for season 2. And I think we have so much more of a sense of the scale of the number of people who are working in the West Wing this season than we did last season. There's just so many more people in every room, which I think adds to the camp factor because it feels like he's like commanding a much bigger group of people.
He is attempting to do the Andrew Jackson speech throughout the entirety of this scene and is just being talked over by everyone.
And just a quick caveat to that Margaret is standing next to him, obviously, as his number 2, in a lovely buttercup yellow blazer.
Gorgeous blazer. Real pop of colour from her. She is absolutely killing me in this scene because her job has been to assign everyone to their like Block of Cheese Day group. And Leo's like, oh, I'm sure Margaret took a lot of time to make sure that everyone was like properly assigned. And she's just behind him, just like shaking her head. And then he turns to look at her and she just immediately changes to nodding her head. She's a comedy genius. The scene is also crashed by an angry Toby arriving. Now, Toby has been kind of making his way through the protesters. We will get on to Toby's personal response to protesters, but I would just like to pull 3 quotes, which may take us to his sort of stance on protesters. Sorry I'm late. I got waylaid by 30,000 tourists. I've seen better organized crowds at the DMV. These people are amateurs.
I'm absolutely obsessed with Toby calling the protesters tourists because he feels they're not worthy of the name of protester.
Yeah.
And just literally saying, in my day, we knew how to protest.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. He then has this insane like back and forth with CJ where she's like, oh, I'll do that. You can take my Block of Cheese Day thing. And they're like, ha 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 ha. And then she just turns and looks at him, like raises one eyebrow and says, "You want to make out with me right now, don't you?"
And he just doesn't even flicker an eyelid and just says, "Well, when don't I?"
What is happening?
You know what it's giving is like Lizzie and like her best guy friend who she works behind a bar with. Like they are so like flirtatious with each other as two kind of like queer people. It's like they have this like full-time bit going that they're like...
Yes, I love the concept that Toby and CJ have a secret bit that they're like madly in love with one another. And everyone's like, haha, wait, what? And they're like, well, I don't know. What do you think? I agree with what you put in the shed, Dockley, which is that Toby is turned on by capable people because he's a queer gal.
Yeah, truly. I mean, why else would he have gotten Andrea? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he's certainly not laughing her into bed.
So cruel. I'd say like Toby's got game.
Toby does have game, but he's not going to be like a court jester, like entertaining the girls to make them swoon.
No. He's wooing in a very different way.
Yeah.
But he is wooing, as we will see later. So, little new character alert. Mm-hmm. Donna's introducing us to a woman called Stephanie.
And my thought was, dare we dream one of the gals from the flat share?
Yes, Stephanie is here. She's wearing a gorgeous camel coat and wool scarf and has a glorious 2000s bob.
Yeah.
And it leads us into a plot line for Donna, which is very nice.
I love Donna leading a plot line that has nothing to do with Josh.
Yeah. Like he's completely separate from this storyline that she's got. And it's really nice. That actor is getting to like be like, okay, I'm more than just the girl that's in love with Josh now.
It just means that Donna's character isn't like solely a function of Josh's character. It's like she has an independent existence in this world.
Yeah. And it's really lovely that the kind of storyline that's happening with Stephanie is all about like kind of Donna showcasing how good she is at her job.
Yeah.
And like how much she loves her job and not just how much she loves Josh.
Yeah. And also I think because she's in an assistant role, I think it's so useful for us to see how she is perceived as somebody who doesn't work in the White House. Mm-hmm. Like a friend coming in and being like, you've been this huge success and you're actually really powerful and you would be able to potentially help me with this thing, you know?
And we think at this point, our predictions are that this is going to be pardon related because we need to talk to Sam Seaborn. Mm-hmm. But we're off for a walk and talk, Lee, with Jed Bartlett. The outlandish quote to begin this with would be, "Bring me the 10-year projections, a Ouija board and a magic wand."
Love Ouija board reference number 2 for the show.
Which does raise for me the concept, has Aaron Sorkin used a Ouija board?
Oh, 1000%, absolutely. He's like tried to summon the ghost of Abraham Lincoln at some point, you know, just to ask a few cues.
So, Lee, I would like us to read out this little Charlie Bartlett back and forth, and then we will continue. Would you like to be Bartlett or Charlie?
I'll be Bartlett, please.
Okay.
What's next?
Sir, I just need a moment to discuss a fax that's just come in.
From whom?
Jonathan Bartlett.
That name sounds familiar.
He's your brother.
Yes, I remember being locked in a steamer trunk.
That doesn't sound so bad.
There were actual steamers in there. I was in there with seafood.
What the fuck was happening in Jed's childhood?
So first of all, I'm like, oh my God, it's a Bartlett sibling. And then I was like, another casual reference to child abuse from Jed.
Yeah.
For the second time this episode, are you okay, hon?
Yeah, what's going on?
Is everything okay at home?
What's happening? Also, like, I find it sus, to use a Gen Z term. Oh, she's so young. That when someone references a sibling of yours, not to be like, oh my God, what did they say?
Yeah.
Just to be like, oh, he once locked me in a cabinet with seafood.
Also, it is such boomer energy just in general to kind of refer to child abuse as like a fun childhood jape.
Or as a, you wouldn't understand because you kids are so soft these days. You know? What I would like to say is that it's giving Carrie Bradshaw's childhood.
Oh my God, yes.
Where like in Sex and the City, there's like very few references to Carrie Bradshaw's family and upbringing, apart from like a few black and white photos, which look like they were taken on the prairies. And it's like, okay, but if it's the year 2000 now,
And she's like 34.
We're not in black and white, I don't think.
No. She did not grow up in the Great Depression.
So, Bartlett is aggrieved because he wants to build a library. This is his legacy.
This is his presidential library. So every president builds their presidential library after they leave office. Yeah.
What?
This is a thing. So there's like Obama's presidential library. There's the Bush presidential library. It's a thing.
It's a lot of libraries.
Yeah.
Okay. I just kind of thought, well, that makes sense for me as his legacy option. He wouldn't build like a sports center or a school. He'd be like, of course, a library.
No, but this is why Bartlett is freaked out that people are already talking about his presidential library, because it means they're counting him out and like the days of his power are coming to an end. If we're talking about the presidential library.
He doesn't want to be lame ducked because everyone's like, well, it's kind of on the library thing now. So
yeah.
Again, it leads to another insane Charlie Bartlett convo.
Just a return to the Charlie Bartlett vaudeville act that's been developing over season 2.
The sort of sparky two-hander. The site violates the Historic Barn and Bridges Preservation Act.
Which says?
I've got it here in my notes. Requires that all non-housing farm and ranch structures built prior to 1900 be preserved by their owners unless destroyed by an act of God.
What plaid, flannel-wearing, cheese-eating yahoo of a milkman governor signed that idiot bill into state law? It was me, wasn't it?
Gorgeous. Stunning. Let's move on. Time for Stephanie to meet Sam. So the conclusion of why Stephanie and Donna know each other is not the house share, but Stephanie and I were at Wisconsin together and bonded as the result of a mutual loathing of the same ex-boyfriend.
I am obsessed with the lore of the backdrop of Stephanie and Donna. It's yet more confirmation that Donna is a girl's girl.
Yeah.
And we're just getting lore upon lore upon lore as this scene goes on.
Stephanie's backstory is bonkers. So Stephanie's grandfather died in jail while serving for spying whilst working at the White House. And Sam's like, okay, cool. Like, I see that you basically want him to be like considered for like a posthumous pardon.
Yeah.
But like, there's so many people, like, why is this important? And I don't have the time really to do the work to do this. And she was like, no, you've already done the work. And then she hands over to him a thesis he wrote when he was at Princeton talking about why her grandfather should be pardoned.
Wow.
And now Stephanie's dad is ill. And she's like, my greatest gift to him before he dies would be to like pardon his father for being wrongly accused of spying. I don't think, it's crazy. I don't think since Toby's veteran storyline have we had like an ep with like a core story like this.
Yes,
like,
that is so true.
Like outside human interest, because we had quite a lot of those in season 1.
Yeah.
Where like characters would arrive just for an episode, have these like quite big emotional arcs. Kind of in season 2, it's very much been in-house storylines.
Yes, yeah.
But to the protest.
Toby whistling in the face of the protesters is so iconic.
Just his car in traffic, like protesters like basically trying to bang on the window and he's just reading the newspaper, his like feet up on the seat in front of him whistling. He arrives at the kind of, I guess it's that they've invited, I think it's like 150 of the protesters to come in and basically do a Q&A session that Toby's going to host to basically see if he can answer any of the grievances that the protesters have. For this, he is going to be like minded by a member of Washington, D.C. police. And so we meet Officer Rhonda Sachs.
I'm obsessed with Rhonda. Loved her from moment 1.
My instinct is that Rhonda is a bi queen, very much like Toby.
Oh, love that.
Yeah.
Love that for her.
Now, let us delve into one of their many flirtatious exchanges. Toby's like, how many different ways do you know how to kill a man?
How many ways do I need?
I like you.
It is very flirty, isn't it?
It's very flirty, but also like, God, I fucking respect you so much.
Yeah.
Which is wild, because I kind of thought Toby would be quite like anti-police.
I think, though, when he's faced with just like a hot female police officer, it's a very different energy.
Yeah. We'll come back to them later. But let's go for a coffee with Sam, Stephanie, and Donna. The mess, once again, the canteen getting some serious screen time.
Mm-hmm.
All I have to say about this is that Sam is so respectful in this scene with Stephanie.
Yeah, it really shows me why he actually has his job.
Yeah. Essentially, he needs to kick off the process first by approaching the FBI and being like, look, you made the call on this guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be raising him for a pardon, but I'm just giving you guys a heads up.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm going to go and do that. But the way he explains every part of the process to Stephanie and controls her expectations is so kind.
Yeah.
And this is the Sam we have come to love, the lover of dentistry, the follower of stars. Long may he prosper.
Also, a moment for, I think it really deepens the friendship between Donna and Sam, which I feel has been very much developing over the course of season 2, ever since we had that exchange where Donna told him to reach for the stars, Sam. I feel like they've developed their own friendship independent of Josh, which I love.
I'm going to say this is excellent actor researching and maybe some tidbits of information that the writing team have given them. But in my head, it's like, okay, what were all the things that happened when Josh was sick? What were the conversations that happened? How many times was Donna calling Sam and giving him updates? And vice versa.
Yeah.
Or Donna being like, I'm going to take some food over to Josh's later. And Sam being like, I'll bring some beers. Why don't we all watch the game together? And I feel like that's built their friendship there. It's their shared caring for this person while he was in recovery.
Yeah, it just feels like there's a closeness there that we didn't see in season 1.
And it feels very independent of Josh, but not about him in its origin.
Yeah. It almost feels like, okay, yeah, my best friend's girlfriend who I really love and respect. I'm just going to say.
Just putting it out there. I mean, we couldn't possibly comment, could we, Leigh? Eyebrows.
I will say then when Sam goes into his next exchange with Josh, the score is extremely ominous.
Very heavy. Why do I feel like Sam's about to die? And I just think Josh is trying to make him laugh and cheer him up. And Sam is incredibly sad.
I also meant to mention earlier that it is really adorable that everyone knows about what's happening in Sam's personal life because Sam confided in his best bud that he was really upset, and then Josh just gave the rest of the team a heads up. It's really adorable.
And then, Leigh, you kind of cracked open the kind of core of the episode here in the shared doc.
It's all a metaphor, Fee. Espionage, deceit of both country and in marriage.
Very good. Very good.
It's all about fidelity to one's home, one's family, and ultimately one's country.
America. It's very Aaron, isn't it?
It's extremely Aaron, yes.
Yeah.
The macro speaking to the micro.
Yeah, he loves it. The Russian doll of stories, not to use Russian, which obviously comes very much into sharp relief with the spying later. Back to Toby and Officer Sachs. Toby is on fire here, Leigh. He's at the front of this hall where the protesters are just being very unruly and not listening. Poor Jerry, who's kind of the organizer of the protests, he's not got a hope in hell.
No, Toby is actually quite adorable in this scene. He's so grumpy, but in spite of himself, he can't help but want to give this young organizer a chance to actually get something done by trying to impart some wisdom.
Yeah, I'm really, really on board with him being this is what's wrong with the left. And then asking for pizza and reopening his paper.
King. It's king energy for sure.
Yeah, his status has never been higher. Let's go to the FBI and meet Special Agent Casper.
And I was like, oh my God, it's him. That guy.
It's Greg Clark. No, Clark Gregg.
Sorry. The man has 2 first names. It's not our fault.
It's Clark Gregg, and we will remember him from such times, Leigh, as watching all the Marvel films in lockdown.
We will, correct.
What I will say is that he looks very young here, and he is performing a scene which I would describe as a terse meeting. So let's go to the cartographers.
Oh my God, please.
This is perhaps my favorite scene ever.
Yeah.
I love it.
I will say, love the map makers, and I would love to give not just another Seattle shout out. Oh my God, I'm on Lizzie the other day was like, you love everything to do with Seattle. And I was like, yeah, true. But a shout out to Mr. Mikulich at North Shore Junior High School, who actually taught me all of this when I was 14.
I am obsessed with CJ being flabbergasted by the actual size of Greenland. Obviously, sorry to bring up Greenland. It's a bit of a hot topic at the moment. Also, at one point, while the cartographers are like taking her through the maps, Josh has just arrived for the fun of it and has just started manspreading, and CJ just like slaps his leg, just like make him stop doing it.
I'm so glad, because obviously in the Constellations episode, we were really personally offended by Josh's manspreading. So I'm glad to see that we're circling back to that as a theme.
Do you mean celestial navigation?
That's what I mean. In my head, I've been calling it Constellations because I couldn't remember the title.
And as we know, Sam was following the Constellations.
But also Constellations is definitely like a play about somebody with a degenerative disease.
It's a pretty heavy play.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I love is the moment where CJ says, "Where the hell is that?" And the chief cartographer is like, "Oh, it's where you've been living this whole time. Shall I continue?"
So cunty from the map makers. Love it.
Yeah, lovely. Let's head back to the protesters. Toby is still reading his paper and Jerry is still trying to control the crowd.
It's so interesting that there was a time when Aaron Sorkin was writing this episode in 2001, we had to explain what the World Trade Organization was because September 11th hasn't happened yet. But it's so funny that like in this episode where we have New York Minute as a major theme, we're also talking about the World Trade Organization. Is Aaron Sorkin yet again predicting the future? It's terrifying.
Is he a time traveler? I think in this scene, there's a really, really interesting conversation between Officer Sachs and Toby, where they talk about the privilege of the protesters.
Yeah.
And that, for me, I found very poignant and really interesting.
Yeah.
It's basically like, Toby's like, the problem is, it's like, look around this room. All these people are angry and they're like, they want to talk about all of these issues, but do any of them look like the people who are actually being affected by these issues? Mm-hmm. And like, I would much rather sit and talk to those people.
Yeah.
To which Officer Sachs responds, a lot of third worlders in the cabinet today, were there?
You're starting to bother me.
That's because I'm armed.
No, I like it. I'm obsessed with the chemistry. Also, like, I don't know if Toby is like on heat this episode or what's going on, but he's just flirting with everything that moves. Every like powerful, empowered, independent woman that he sees, Toby is just like
frisky,
absolutely
very frisky. Shall we go back to the sit room and meet Nancy again?
Oh my God, the lady of I Look Ridiculous fame. Love her.
So Sam is going in to talk to Nancy in the sit room because he's been kind of summoned post FBI meeting. Nancy's entrance is a wow because she's on a conference call. Sam comes in, she like beckons him in, sits him down, and then just like clutches the phone away from her and she's like, "Sorry, I'm the only woman on a conference call."
But yet is still having to clarify who she is when she's speaking, and then says, "Do I have a bizarrely androgynous voice?"
I love it. I love it. So she confirms to Sam, she's like, "Look, I need you to kind of drop the Stephanie pardon because he was a spy."
He was, in fact, a spy.
And Sam's like, no. I've did all this research. Like, this is the thing. Like, there wasn't enough evidence. And she's like, no. We couldn't release the information because we've only recently decoded it in the 70s. But here's a butt ton of information as to why this dude was a spy. His code name was Blackwater.
Yeah.
He also got given the Order of Lenin.
Terrifying.
So was in fact like a major spy.
Quite a big deal, actually. Screaming that Donna's gal pal, who she gossed with over Dr. Freeride, is in fact the granddaughter of a Soviet spy.
Yeah. And I would also like to give flowers to Nancy for being an incredibly good manager.
Yeah.
And navigating Sam's emotional response like a pro. We see your work, Nancy, and we love it.
Yeah.
She like provides him this really big folder.
It's like a cement block of a folder.
Yeah. And he's like, "I can't see that." And she's like, "I never showed it to you. I've redacted the things that you literally cannot see.
Yeah.
But you're going to sit here with me and you're going to read that until you feel like you can go away and move on
and
from
trust
this."
Me. Yeah.
Phenomenal management from her. But back to maps. And once again, hilarious interactions. "So you're probably wondering what all this has to do with equality."
No, I'm wondering where France really is.
I think it's really funny that Americans don't know where stuff is. Is that bad to say? I don't, not in an offensive way. I think it's endearing.
Yes.
Because you live in such a huge country. Like, it's in North America's vast.
Yeah, huge. But also, we're all working off of a distorted map at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah.
So,
as we learned from this episode, the maps lie.
As one of the map people says, Salvatore Natoli of the National Council of Social Studies argues, in our society, we unconsciously equate size with importance and even power. And then there's a look of real self-awareness from Josh.
And CJ looks at him and he's like really going through something, and she's like,
You can just see like Josh's entire life flash before his eyes.
He's like, oh shit. I think the map storyline is my favorite from this episode.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Toby still loathes protesters.
Toby calling out pink hat feminists and black squares on Instagram like 25 years before they became an issue. All the while having a cheeky sig. Him just being like, it's activist vacation is what it is. Spring break for anarchist wannabes. The black t-shirts, the gas masks, it's fashion accessories.
I would love to have a conversation with Toby about what he believes to be a fashion accessory. Let the record state that it is a cigar that he is smoking, Leigh.
Oh my God.
He's just like stood on the steps, like Officer Sachs is kind of behind him. Josh arrives and is like, hey, like, should we just like give it a go? I've come to watch you, essentially. For entertainment, I've come down.
Like, does Josh have any actual work to do today?
He has a very important job, and I really am concerned that he's like basically never doing anything. Toby's quote before he heads inside to talk to the protesters is, I hate these people with the heat of a nova, yet here I go. To which Officer Sachs responds, attaboy. And we just simply don't get enough attaboys.
As a feminist act, dear listeners, as a feminist challenge to us all, and this is not exclusively to our female and non-binary listeners, I would also mount this as a challenge to our male listeners. Yeah. To whenever a man in your life is getting a bit big for his boots, just throw in an attaboy. Just throw it in.
We just don't say it enough to men. Yeah. And I am going to take it into the vernacular.
Yeah.
Just going to pop a pin in the fact that Josh is wearing a gorgeous Burberry scarf.
He reads as a Burberry boy, for sure.
But it's also giving, in light of our pick me Josh energy, it's also giving like, oh, this? It's just like a vintage thing that my dad had. Like, I've actually never thought about it. Is it Burberry? Is that like a big brand, or... He knows what he's doing.
In terms of like designer brands, it's never been clearer to me that Sam Seaborn is Tommy Hilfiger and Josh Lyman is Burberry.
Josh Lyman is like Burberry and Sam Seaborn is anything with a quarter-length zip.
Yeah. And then I think Donna Moss is just, in my mind, will always and forever be a Kate Spade girly.
Truly.
You know?
Very Kate Spade.
Yeah.
Gorgeous work from you, Leigh.
Thank you.
Should we go back to the West Wing and to the president?
Please.
Jed is frustrated because he feels like he's just starting to get a handle on the job. And then like people are already talking about the library. And so he's like, I feel like it's already over. And then Leo kind of nudges him about re-election, but like not in so many words.
But also it's not just about the presidency. It's the fact that he's like, this might be the end of my working life. This might be the end of what I get to contribute.
He says this will be the last job I ever have.
Which really devastated me.
Yeah. But then what I did enjoy is that Jed was like, look, I'm not fully sold on re-election. Because it does mean that he's taken on board what Abby said to him.
Yeah.
And he's being truthful and honest.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Sam and the spy. Sam says some crazy stuff this episode where you're like, okay, you're clearly processing what's going on with your dad. I can't remember what he says this with reference to, but he's like, if you don't practice, you may as well give the clarinet to the kid who'll use it.
I will say it's a complete non sequitur. It has nothing to do with the topic at hand.
But it's like, okay, cool. So you didn't want to play clarinet, but your dad made you play clarinet. And now you're like, well, you shouldn't have been making me play clarinet when you were obviously fucking another woman.
Yeah,
Wild. But this scene between Donna and Sam.
Wow.
It's a really, really well written two-hander.
It's like a Donna explainer, but like we've never seen before.
Yeah. And the thing that's really nice is it's really good to see Donna being like, no, tell me.
Yeah.
like, we probably don't have the same clearance, but like, just tell me what's happening.
Yeah. And what I also really enjoy is it's the battle between the kind of like academic intelligence that Sam Seaborn absolutely has, and no doubt Donna has as well, but what she is more strongly bringing to the table in this series and able to offer to others is her emotional intelligence. And what she's bringing forward is why should she have to know?
Yeah.
Who will it serve?
Yeah, like, I can do a better job if I have the information.
Yeah.
You don't need to protect me. Protect me from what?
Yeah.
Donna says, it was people pushing paper around 50 years ago. What does it matter?
It was high treason and it mattered a great deal. This country is an idea, and one that has lit the world for 2 centuries, and treason against that idea is not just a crime against the living. This ground holds the graves of people who died for it, who gave what Lincoln called the last full measure of devotion, of fidelity. You understand, the last full measure of devotion to treason against them is, and then he breaks off because he can't continue.
He can't bring himself to continue.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. And then he's like storming up a staircase, and he's like, I'm going to go in there and tell Stephanie just the kind of man her father was.
And then Donna absolutely calls him out and says, Sam, you meant grandfather.
Oh.
This isn't about your dad, Sam.
No. This isn't about dads letting people down. This is about really high-level spying during the Cold War.
Excited and intrigued for a brave new world in which Sam has daddy issues.
Oh my God, yeah, me too. So he goes storming into his office. Stephanie's there and she's like, what news? And he's so ready to be like, do you know? And then he like says the name of like a woman that essentially died because of the spying work that Stephanie's grandfather was doing. And she's like, no, what, like, should I? And he crumbles and lies to her because it's the kind of thing to do.
And just absolutely melts because, as we've come to know, especially in season 2, Sam Seaborn has an actual heart of gold.
Yeah, true. A heart of gold. And Donna's just like leaning against the door. And Stephanie's like, thank you so much, Sam. You've been amazing. And Donna just says, Sam's the man.
Absolutely ended me. Absolutely ended me.
Then Stephanie leaves. And Donna just like brings in Sam for a really big hug.
What a beautiful moment for platonic friendship and Sam feeling his feels to an 80s power ballad.
It's really lovely. Like, it's a long hug. And like, I think because they're in such a professional environment all the time and it's so high stakes and it's a very witty environment and we don't really see any of them at home. I was suddenly really aware that like, I have not really seen anyone touch each other in this show.
Yeah.
Like the odd like handshake or like high five or like jostle. But like they go through a lot.
Yeah.
And then like the majority of them are single. So you've got nowhere to put that.
Yeah.
So I loved that moment. And then kind of the gang collects and Toby and Josh arrive. They're obviously very like kind of like high off of the buzz of like Toby shouting at protesters. And Josh is kind of giving it large. He's like, you know what? You are old school, my friend. And Toby's like, stop talking like that. Let's go. Let me tell you something, though. That's the second time this year I've almost got killed. And both times I was with you. So you're going to need a new wingman. Toby's like, you were my old wingman?
And then just absolutely screaming that the plan is that Toby and Josh are going to get Sam drunk and put him to bed.
Which I love.
Yeah.
We kind of close out the episode with Sam being like, you guys go ahead. And everyone leaves. And then he calls his dad to like talk to him for the first time since he's heard the news. But I was just ended by the fact that he sat next to his computer and his screensaver is Abraham Lincoln.
Nothing has ever been more on brand.
What an episode.
What an ep. Wow.
Shall we go to the quick fires, Leigh?
Please.
Best fashion?
Margaret's buttercup yellow.
Yeah.
Not enough yellow in the West Wing.
No, very underappreciated
very muted
colour.
Tones generally.
Yeah, we're very autumn in the West Wing in general. I will say an honourable mention to Josh's Burberry scarf.
Lovely.
And also perhaps to Officer Sachs's uniform, which she is wearing the frickin' hell out of.
Truly.
What could a British or Irish politician never get away with?
Building a monument to his or herself in the form of a library.
Yes. I don't think they would be able to do anything while still living.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of got to be like, in retrospect, how long until any of our bingo card items, guns, abortion, free speech, religion come up? I mean, we're really once again touching on Cold War. McCarthyism got thrown in a few times, which feels fun. And also maps. More love for maps, please.
Yeah.
Best writerly moment.
Salvatore Natoli of the National Council of Social Studies argues in our society we unconsciously equate size with importance and even power.
I would just like to raise the offer of all scenes between Officer Sachs and Toby.
Love that, yeah.
With, special mention to, I hate these people with the heat of a Nova, yet here I go.
Attaboy.
Very good. Man, I feel like a man.
My father didn't pick up a cocktail waitress, Leo. He's had a woman in an apartment in Santa Monica for 28 years.
Mine was a little something called team morale, Josh. You got to make people feel good about themselves. All right, everybody, shut the hell up. I've fired more people than you before breakfast. And then, girl, I feel like a girl. You want to make out with me right now, don't you?
When don't I?
And Leigh, what was the moment that made you proudest to be an American?
Obviously, Sam Seaborn's monologue about why treason matters.
Because this country is an idea.
Yeah, it is an idea, Fee. It's the great experiment.
This ground holds the graves of people who died for it, who gave what Lincoln called the last full measure of devotion, of fidelity. Honestly, I was moved.
It was deeply moving, I must say.
Yeah, well done. Well done, Rob Lowe.
Well done, everyone. Well done, Donna.
What a cracker of an ep. Thank you very much.
And I would like to just take a moment for the unexpected addition of just the power ballad as a concept to the West Wing.
To the power ballad as like the bookend of an episode of the West Wing.
I feel like Aaron Sorkin was just like having a large glass of Malbec at home and was like struggling with writing the episode and then was like, I'm going to listen to some Eagles just to like get inspired.
Yeah.
Just really feeling himself at like midnight.
Yeah.
A little bit drunk.
Amazing. Well, what are we going to learn about today, Leigh?
Well, we're going to touch on Abraham Lincoln, the last full measure of devotion.
Please.
And espionage.
Yes. Spies.
Spies, but maybe not the spies as we imagine the spies. Because I think spies, we often go like McCarthyism, Cold War, etc.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of spies in America, I just think Tom Hanks' Bridge of Spies.
Completely.
Because I've always thought of spying as a very like kind of British pastime.
Totally.
Because we love a bit of espionage.
Please, absolutely. MI5. Is that what I mean?
Yeah, because it's the same with you, because you've got the FBI and the CIA. And it's like one does like Homeland Security and one does like international. Yeah. And we have MI5 and MI6 and I think it's the same vibe.
Yeah.
One's, in-house and one's like, you'll never know. They're everywhere.
007, etc.,
James Bond.
But in classic fashion, we're taking it back to the 1800s.
Please do.
So we have a lady who was known growing up as Wild Rose.
Tell me more about Wild Rose.
Her name was Rose Greenhow. Well, it became that when she married the prominent physician and historian Robert Greenhow in 1835. She kind of becomes like a leading hostess in DC and is kind of the confidant and gal pal of several powerful political figures, including the notable racist John C. Calhoun and James Buchanan. Now, her life took a bit of a turn when her family left DC in the 1850s and her husband and 5 of their 8 children died. I've not found an explanation for how or why that happened, but it was the 1800s,
Yeah.
Following her husband's death, she returns to DC. And as a Southerner, she had for a long time had been staunchly pro-slavery.
I see.
Yeah. So she remains in Washington after the outbreak of the Civil War and becomes a ringleader of a growing network of anti-Union spies. So she is a Confederate spy in DC through the Civil War, and she used her social position as like a DC hostess in her espionage for the South.
So as in like, I'm just a little lady. I wouldn't possibly know what any of y'all are talking about. Can I get you some more tea?
she was referred to as like an engaging conversationalist. So
wow.
she used this to get important information out of politicians and diplomats.
That's very clever for the power that women had at that time.
Passing secrets to the Confederate General PGT Beauregard and other contacts. In 1861, she got some really important information about the Union Army's planned attack in Manassas, Virginia. And she sent a 16-year-old courier, Betty Duval, through 20 miles of Union territory with coded messages for Beauregard tucked in her hair.
Yeah, see, the thing is, that is obviously insane, but also very glam.
If only it had been an aid of a righteous cause.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on that one, aren't you?
The Confederate President Jefferson Davis later credited her with the Confederate Army's success in the Battle of Bull Run.
There's quite a lot of success for like quite a large political engagement to just give to one woman who wasn't there.
Truly, it's kind of crazy. Now, in 1861, Alan Pinkerton, the head of the federal government's newly formed Secret Service in the Union, arrested her and raided her home. And she and her youngest daughter...
Fair. Does seem fair, though.
Yeah. Her and her youngest daughter, Little Rose, were placed under house arrest and later sent to prison. But she still somehow managed to get information to Confederate leaders from prison. Following her incarceration, she was examined by a War Department commission. And in June of 1862, she was exiled to the South, which feels like not a punishment.
No, because surely that might be where she has like family.
Where she was greeted as a heroine of the Confederacy.
Yeah.
And really quite richly rewarded by President Jefferson Davis. Now, what I find, this ends very strangely in that after her release, she set sail for Europe as an unofficial agent of the Confederacy. President Davis of the Confederacy sent her out on a diplomatic mission to Europe where she met Napoleon III and Queen Victoria and became engaged to a British nobleman.
What?
Yeah. She also, while she was in Britain, published her prison diary, My Imprisonment and the First Year of Abolition Rule in Washington. However, on returning to America in 1864, her ship ran aground off the coast of North Carolina after encountering Union forces. And she was trying to escape the shipwreck in a rowboat when she drowned in choppy water, being weighed down by gold intended for the Confederate treasury.
That is such a yarn, isn't it?
Mental.
The gold in her skirts
drowned her.
Wow.
I'm also obsessed with the vision of this like Southern socialite lady just trying to row herself away from a shipwreck in a small rowboat.
Yes.
In her hoop skirt.
Which was filled with gold.
From Queen Victoria and Napoleon III.
Oh my God.
However, that's kind of the side note to the main thing that we're going to discuss today, which is that nearly 200,000 African Americans fought in the Civil War, and most of them fought in segregated army units, but some served successfully as spies for the Union. And they were aided in this by the fact that the Confederate leaders were racist. And so they exploited the fact that the Confederates thought they were totally incapable of intelligent thought and were able to collect information while operating in plain sight.
That's amazing.
Which leads me, Fiona, to our main point today, which is Harriet Tubman.
Yes, let's talk about Harriet.
So I just wanted to offer Wild Rose as a kind of counterpoint. So we have this like rich white lady spying for the Confederacy and being frankly quite batshit, in my view, throughout. But Harriet Tubman was born somewhere between 1815 and 1822. Historians are not totally clear. But she was one of 9 children to Harriet and Ben Ross, who were enslaved people owned by 2 different families in Maryland. Her mom struggled to keep her family together, and 3 of her older sisters were sold to other plantation owners. Harriet Tubman, was loaned out to a nearby family at the age of 6 for 2 years.
Whoa.
And it goes without saying, was often in like miserable and dangerous conditions. She didn't obviously get a traditional education in a classroom. Harriet Tubman was illiterate. She never got to learn to read and write. But what she did do and what she did learn was how to walk the forest in total silence and navigate by clouds and stars. From her connection to kind of the natural world, she basically got like a botanist and a chemist's understanding of edible and poisonous plants and what plants were most useful for medical treatments. She also couldn't swim, which forced her to learn the ways of the local rivers and streams, how deep they were, their currents, their traps, etc., whilst also at the same time from an early age being subjected to beatings and abuse, which were commonplace in many slave-owning homes. She was already quite like a frail and small child. She wasn't any more than 5 foot tall. And due to this ill treatment, her health did deteriorate. And in her early teens, she was really badly injured when she was out running errands, and a local slave owner was trying to stop the attempted escape of another enslaved person and threw a weight across a room, which hit Harriet Tubman in the head. It fractured her skull, people believe. And she was given very little medical care or recuperation time, which led to her suffering from headaches and seizures, which may have been a form of epilepsy for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
She is quoted as saying, "And I prayed to God to make me strong and able to fight, and that's what I've always prayed for ever since." She's also quoted as saying, "I should fight for my liberty as long as my strength lasted." Around 1844, she married John Tubman, who was a free black man, hence she got the surname Tubman. And mixed marriages between enslaved people and free black people were relatively common in the area at the time. And shortly after getting married and changing her surname, she was born as Araminta, or Minty to her family, but she changed her name to Harriet to honor her mother. Which brings us to 1849, when she hears that her owner is planning to sell her. And her and 2 of her brothers briefly escape, but for reasons that historians still are not clear on, her brothers decided to turn back, forcing Harriet to go back with them. But a few months later, she set off again alone, leaving her husband and her family behind, and making her way through Delaware and Pennsylvania, stopping along the Underground Railroad on the way. She eventually settles in Philadelphia. So she's made it to freedom. Amazing. But then a year later, in 1850, she hears that one of her nieces is about to be sold.
Right.
Now, there is some historical conjecture that this may have, in fact, she always referred to this girl as her niece, but there is some conjecture by historians that she was actually her daughter.
Okay.
Because apparently they bore like a really striking physical resemblance and had this like really close bond. But so Harriet goes back and she then conducted nearly 24 missions to help other people escape, mostly kind of friends and family. And historians believe that in the decade before the Civil War, she was responsible for leading around 70 people to freedom and out of slavery.
Wow.
Which I think, like, to escape yourself and then to say, I'm going to go back is so beyond courageous.
Yeah.
She said, "I was a conductor on the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger."
Wow.
An activist in a Boston-based Freedmen's Aid Society remembered her by saying, "She has needed disguises so often that she seems to have command over her face and can banish all expression from her features and look so stupid that nobody would suspect her of knowing enough to be dangerous, but her eyes flash with intelligence and power when she is roused." Which I love. Now, she is best known, this is what she's best known for, is ushering enslaved people to freedom on the Underground Railroad in the 1850s. But she also set up a vast espionage ring for the Union during the Civil War. So shortly after hostilities began, she is recruited by John Andrew, who was then the governor of Massachusetts. And he was, it's giving ally. He was a passionate abolitionist. And he recruited her to the Union forces occupying Beaufort, South Carolina, to provide support as a spy and a scout. And John Andrew himself is known for his campaign to form the all-black 45th and 55th regiments. He's said to have admired Tubman and thought that she would be a great intelligence asset to the Union. So shortly after the Civil War breaks out in 1861, she joins abolitionists who are headed south to assist enslaved people who have escaped to safety behind Union lines. in early 1862, she arrives in South Carolina. Now, while she was there, she was kind of officially a nurse. And so she's providing medical and other care for formerly enslaved people who at the time were flocking to Union lines for safety. And so she was kind of a nurse and a teacher for those newly liberated slaves in Union camps, where her skill at curing soldiers who were suffering from a variety of diseases became quite legendary. But also, upon her arrival, she was provided with a military pass and made contact with local enslaved people who secretly shared their knowledge of Confederate plans and movements with her.
Wow.
She then recruits a team of like 8 or 9 scouts who were from the area and knew the terrain really well. And between 1862 and 1863, she's mapping the region for the Union to identify Confederate outposts and vulnerabilities, which led a black unit of Union soldiers to conduct successful raids throughout the region. And she recruited from the formerly enslaved people that she taught and nursed. And they acted as river pilots and scouts and engaged in kind of various different activities to undermine local support for the Confederacy. And these black men were obviously incredibly brave because they slipped behind Confederate lines, posing as servants or enslaved people in order to gather military intelligence.
That's amazing. It's just absolutely using people's racism and prejudices
against them.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's absolutely fascinating.
She was also incredibly valuable to the Union Army because many of the African Americans were very wary of Union soldiers, but they trusted Harriet Tubman. And so George Garrison, a second lieutenant in the 55th Massachusetts Regiment, said that Tubman secured more intelligence from them than anybody else.
Wow.
Because she had these black soldiers' trust. And her Reconnaissance work led to one of the most daring raids of the Civil War, where she joined the newly formed South Carolina Regiment of formerly enslaved people. And in June 1863, she herself led an armed expedition along the, I'm going to say, Combahee River, making her the first woman in U.S. history to command an armed military raid.
Wow.
She guided Colonel James Montgomery and his 2nd South Carolina Colored Volunteers Regiment along the Combahee River. When the Union General Dave Hunter asked if she'd be willing to travel with several gunboats up the river to disrupt Confederate logistics and identify where mines might be located along the river, she said she would only do it if it was with Colonel Montgomery, who was a confidant and associate of hers, which Hunter approved. And so Harriet Tubman and Colonel Montgomery basically like co-commanded the mission, with Harriet Tubman having the authority to act independently to collect intelligence. And so she was able to identify the enslaved people who had placed the mines and offered them freedom in exchange for identifying where the mines were located. So after guiding the Union boats along these like mine-filled waters and coming ashore, her group successfully rescued more than 700 enslaved people working in nearby plantations, many of whom went on to join the Union Army.
Yeah.
All the while, we are dodging bullets and artillery shells from slave owners and the Confederate Army. She herself, later in her life, described the throngs of enslaved women who came streaming to, quote, Lincoln's gunboats with their babies, baskets, chickens, and pigs. Obviously, this quote is taken down in her vernacular, which I'm not going to use, but to anglicize it, I've never seen such a sight. We laughed and laughed and laughed. Here you'd see a woman with a pail on her head, rice smoking in it just as she'd taken it from the fire, a young one hanging on behind, one hanging around her forehead to hold on, another digging into the rice pot, eating with all its might, hold of her dress or 2 or 3 more, on her back, a bag with a pig in it. I just think that's like such an incredible image of like these enslaved women like running with their kids and their animals and their food for freedom. I just think it's like so beautiful.
And then to see someone like Harriet on that boat being like, yeah come on board.
Yeah. Incredible. After this successful raid, she achieved an honor which was usually reserved for white officers in a Civil War battlefield, when a white commanding officer went to fetch her a pitcher of water as she remained seated at a table. Newspapers from Boston to Wisconsin reported on the raid by noting Harriet Tubman's important role as the Black She-Moses who led the raid and under whose inspiration it was originated and conducted. Colonel James Montgomery, who she led the raid with, would later describe her as a most remarkable woman and invaluable as a scout. However, during her time as a spy for the Union Army and a scout, she was only paid $200 for 3 years of service, forcing her to basically scrape together a living, selling pies, gingerbread, and root beer. For years after the Civil War, she repeatedly requested an official military pension, but was denied. In her petition, she says, "My claim against the U.S. is for 3 years' service as nurse and cook in hospitals and as commander of several men, 8 or 9, as scouts during the late War of the Rebellion, under directions and orders of Edwin M. Stanton, Secretary of War, and several generals. I claim for my services above the sum of $1,800. The annex copies have recently been read over to me and are true to the best of my knowledge, information, and belief." And then she signs it with her mark. Mm-hmm. Brigadier General Rufus Saxton recommended a military pension for her, writing that he had bore witness to the value of her services. She was employed in the hospitals and as a spy and made many raids inside the enemy's lines, displaying remarkable courage, zeal, and fidelity. 2 decades after the war ended, she was still alive, and US Congress introduced legislation calling for her to receive a $2,000 pension, but the bill was defeated. Congress denied her claim, but paid the 8 Black men who she had been commanding.
Oh.
She only received military benefits as the wife of an official veteran on behalf of her second husband, Nelson Davis, as like a military widow, basically.
Right, okay.
But later in life, she went on to become a key figure in the suffrage movement. When she died of pneumonia on March 10th, 1913, she was believed to be 91 and had been fighting for gender equality and the right of free Black women to vote for more than 50 years. And she sunk more into poverty through her life, through the work that she was trying to do, and frequently traveled to give speeches on suffrage in DC and New York. She died surrounded by friends and family. And as she was deeply religious, her last words were, "I go to prepare a place for you." I also think one of her most interesting quotes is, "I had reasoned this out in my mind. There was one of 2 things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other, for no man should take me alive."
Oh, yeah.
In 2016, the Defense Intelligence Agency wrote, "The DIA would like to recognize Harriet Tubman's excellence in defense of the nation through her efforts as a spy, recruiter, handler, scout, operational planner, and combat leader during the American Civil War. Tubman, who died in 1913 at the age of 92, received military honors and was acknowledged by the Smithsonian Institute in 1982 as the only woman to plan and lead a military raid." In 2021, she was accepted into the United States Army Military Intelligence Corps Hall of Fame. She's one of 278 members, only 17 of whom are women, honored for special operations leadership and intelligence work. And in 2030, her likeness is going to appear on the US $20 bill.
Yeah.
Replacing the current portrait featuring the US President Andrew Jackson. And she will be the first ever African American to be on US currency.
That's so huge, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, feels like very late. Like, it would be nice to be like, she's not the first.
Yeah.
But if it's going to be anyone, it should be Harriet.
I think the thing is, I think you learn about these people, you hear the name Harriet Tubman, and you're like, that just feels like somebody who was always destined to be a really important and significant person in history. Like, they almost feel like it's a name that you've almost heard so much that you don't actually engage with the reality of what it took for her to become the thing that we now celebrate.
Yeah.
And ultimately, she started her life as like a young preteen, basically, getting hit over the head by a weight that's being thrown across a room. And like to go from that and being like a physically small person as well, being like under 5 foot, and having all of these like military leaders in the 1860s being like, no, she's brave and like so intelligent and she's a valuable asset.
Yeah.
Like, I just think what a special person to even conceive of doing half the things that she did.
Yeah. No, great session, Leigh. I'm glad to know more about her.
Yeah, and I would just point anybody in the direction of who wants to read more. If you have any young people in your life, there is a book by Thomas B. Allen called Harriet Tubman, Secret Agent, which is for kids, which I think would be likely a really exciting read for them. And then for the adults in our life, Etta L. Fields Black, who is a descendant of one of the soldiers who fought in that raid we were talking about, is a professor at Carnegie Mellon University and has a book called Combahee, Harriet Tubman, the Combahee River Raid, and Black Freedom During the Civil War, which is available for purchase also.
Well, I feel like I want to go and do some more reading now.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. What an incredible American and a patriot.
Yeah. I feel excited for what we might learn about next week. You know, because our episode next week will be covering episode 17, the Stackhouse Filibuster.
I wonder what we might cover, Fee.
I wonder what we might learn about. But I guess, listeners, you'll just have to return next week.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
We've been having such a lovely time on Patreon with our lovely Patreon subscribers. It's patreon.com/QueerGalsWatch. We're also Queer Gals Watch on all socials. I am absolutely thrilled with the number of people who've engaged and want to chat to us about this show. Please don't hesitate to be one of those people if you feel so moved.
Yeah, we have taken the mantle of wingnuts and we are leaning in firmly. So any other fellow wingnuts who are like, hey, you might enjoy this tidbit of information, the likelihood is that we will.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Even if you just want to be like, but what about these Donna outfits? Love that also.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be intellectual. You've heard what we chat about.
Well, let's raise our glasses
to Harriet
Tubman, an American hero.
And I'll see you next week, Leigh.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.